And so the longer you're single into your adulthood, the deeper the patterns go. But when you get married, your life is not your own anymore. You've got to change your patterns. And they got pictures of them preaching, they got pictures of them traveling, and I never see a picture of them and their wife hanging out. Wake up and win. Wake up. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Wake Up and Win podcast. I'm your host, Blaise. I'll be talking to you today. I want to talk about marriage, and I want to talk about a post that I saw online yesterday that really just struck me in light of so many of these pastors and ministers being outed. I'm not even going to say these pastors and ministers falling. I'm going to say these pastors and ministers being outed, because so much of what we've watched is the uncovering of patterns, of years worth of patterns for many of them. And so how do you avoid these types of patterns? This message today, this post today is really for married couples, and not just people in ministry or not in ministry, and those of you who are single that are planning on getting married. This post is called, How Do You Avoid an Emotional Affair? How do you avoid an emotional affair? Now, I don't know this person, and I've never met this person, but they posted online, and just, you know how Facebook is, it just like suggests people to you. So I'm going to read this post, and I want us to I want to hear you guys' thoughts on it today. Shoot your comments below and tell us your story if you're willing to do that, or things you've seen. And for some of this, in my opinion, when I first read it, I was like, there's going to be people that would read something like this and say, that's too extreme. That's too extreme, because one thing that I think that is definitely one thing that I think in this generation, it feels like there's so much of this kind of pushback on anything that would have to do with setting proper boundaries in marriage, or maybe things that would seem too old school. You hear kind of the pushback of the purity culture, or you've got Joshua Harris in his book about I Kissed Dating Goodbye, and now Joshua Harris literally kissed Jesus goodbye. He's like not even a Christian anymore. So there's a lot of pushback on those types of concepts due to the fall of those types of people. But it doesn't take away from some of the principles that maybe we need to revisit. So especially in regards to marriage. So let's just dive into this post. I'm going to read it, and then let's talk about it. Okay, let's see. This guy I have no idea who this guy is. How to avoid an emotional affair. Even if you're married to the best spouse in the whole world, if you do not guard your heart, you may end up falling in love with someone besides your spouse and eventually ruin your marriage. This guy has some writing things, so I'm going to autocorrect them like I'm an AI. No one gets married with a plan to have an affair, but lots of married men and women are into affairs today because they slept when they should have been wide awake with their five senses alert. They slept when they should have been awake. I like that. So number one. Hey guys, this episode is brought to you by Wake Up and Win Insurance. We help clients all over the nation with their term life, whole life, or universal life insurance, and we're definitely happy to help you with a consultation.
Check the description below for more info.
All right, don't be too friendly with the opposite sex. This is where lots of married people land in trouble. Over spirituality and pride will destroy your marriage. You can't handle close friendship with the opposite sex as a married person. Your heart is involved. Set boundaries and be disciplined. Be cordial, be respectful, be godly, be holy. So I like what he said here. Over spirituality and pride will destroy your marriage. Don't be too friendly with the opposite sex. So think about this, okay? I've seen in a lot of scenarios where you've got these dudes that say, well, I'm going to counsel this woman, or I'm going to spend time counseling this woman or helping this woman, or even like this idea of, can you be friends with the opposite sex? Now, as single people, you kind of are free to do whatever, right? When I was a single guy, I was friends with all kinds of people. I'd be friends with guys, friends with girls. But when you're single, you're also in the hunt, especially as a man. You're in the hunt. You're looking for the person that you're going to be married to. You're looking for your life partner. You're looking to fall in love. Women as well, it's a different type of hunt for them. But yeah, they're showing that they're available. They're making themselves available. They're not wearing a wedding ring, which that's a whole nother topic. But they're making themselves available. When you get married, there's new lines drawn. There's new boundaries drawn. But sadly, what we see is that sometimes, especially in the Christian world, there's this idea of, well, first of all, hey, not everything is not everything is flirtatious. Not everything is about guy girl. Not everything is sexual. Like, I'm just friends. We're just friends, this, that, or the other. And especially when you start getting into the ministry world, you've got dudes that want to spend time with, I say want to, and I do think that that's the case, but you'll find that there's like these counseling sessions, prayer sessions, all this kind of stuff. Hey, I'm going to meet with this woman to help her through this issue or this, that, or the other. And I just think that so many times the over spirituality, like this guy said, over spirituality and pride saying, I can handle it, maybe others can't, but I can, it can destroy your marriage. At the end of the day, all of these principles here, in my mind, I'm thinking, how extreme do I want to be in my marriage to protect it? You know, my wife and I are about to be 10 years married in October. And I think, how extreme do I want to be to sustain this marriage for the next 60 years beyond, to hit year 70? You know, 60 years, I'd be 100. But how extreme do I want to be in order to do that, right? So in my opinion, nothing is too extreme to protect the most valuable relationship to me, as well as nothing is too extreme to even protect the perception of the most valuable relationship in my life. Because I think that's the other thing, is we've got to understand the perception that we give off to people makes people think that you're maybe possibly in an emotional affair or possibly crossing boundaries. So that was the first one. Over spirituality, you cannot handle close friendship with the opposite sex as a married person. I don't think it's wise. Let me know your thoughts below. All right, let's go to number 2 here. Number 2 says, don't share your personal problems with an opposite sex friend. It will bond you together. Problems bond people. Problems bond people. I think that's interesting. So don't share your personal problems with the opposite sex. It will bond you together. I know there's going to be people that be like, that's overboard. Sometimes you might just be in a conversation with your friend's spouse or something. Well, here's my thought is, why would you be in a conversation privately with your friend's spouse? Like, why is that happening? And I know, especially in the younger generation, like when I say younger, I'm just talking like millennials, actually, like, the 25 or 30 to 40-year-olds, like, you might be friends, you all got kids, you're all hanging out, you're just in a side conversation with a spouse's, with your friend's spouse or whatever, with the opposite sex. That can happen. I get that. But like, I would just say, be careful of going too deep in those conversations, because you start to pull on heartstrings, or it's possible too. It's possible to do that. Again, like I said, I think there's going to be pushback on some of this because people are so like, no, you got to relax. But at the end of the day, I think that this is how, like, emotional affairs lead to heart, or opening up the heart leads to heart connection, leads to emotional connection. Okay. And then that eventually can lead to major problems in your marriage, right? So anyway, let's keep going here. Let's go number 3. Number 3 here. He says, don't contact anyone of the opposite sex that you might be fond of. If you secretly admire them, you're fond of them, and there's he says, a tingling in your heart at the mere thought of them, don't make contact with them. What do you guys think of that one? So now all of a sudden, if anybody reads this and they've been having any type of contact with a friend of their family or whatever, and then suddenly they stop, they go, okay, they must have liked me. But anyway, I'm just going to say, I think that is super smart, okay? So Christina and I are both aware, like, we've been married almost 10 years. We love each other. We're both uber attracted to each other. We enjoy each other, but we also realize there are millions of people in the world. So what does that mean? It just means that you can't be silly about how life works, right? There's people of the opposite sex that are going to be around. And so if you are suddenly fond of somebody, that doesn't mean you are in love with them or like them. It just means, oh, that's a nice person. They're really great. They're this, that, or the other. Well, maybe don't be like, when you were single and you know that you would have liked that person, probably don't spend time chit-chatting with that person or spending a lot of time contacting that person. It's probably a good idea to avoid something like that. Anyway, I thought that number 3 was good. It made sense to me. Number 4, this one's kind of funny. It says, avoid unnecessary eye contact that lingers with the opposite sex. eye contact that lingers. I don't know. Tell me what you guys would think about that one. But, long eye contact, long eye contact, long eye contact. Let's do this one. Number 5, he says, don't tell any person of the opposite sex that you are romantic or sexy. That private information is for your spouse only. What am I thinking that this guy's saying with this point here? I think he's saying don't get into the details. Well, clearly you wouldn't want to get into the details of your intimate life with your spouse. That would be kind of stupid. But also, saying things like, yeah, I'm a hopeless romantic. I love to give her flowers, or I love this, that, or the other when my husband does this for me, or da-da-da-da. That's probably not something you want to be sharing with the opposite sex. Some of this stuff seems kind of obvious, but maybe it's just not. I don't know. Maybe this is, because I was looking at some of the comments and I saw one guy say, yeah, this is very, very real. I lost a 20-year marriage to this kind of stuff, which is, dude, you can hate on something like this and call it legalism or, being way too strict or whatever. But man, if again, I would say, marriage is the most awesome thing ever if it's protected with proper boundaries. And so how extreme do you want to be to protect that thing? You might look at this and go, you and your spouse might look at it and go, that's kind of psycho. That's weird. Well, maybe not. Number 6, avoid discussions with the opposite sex when you're tired, sad, depressed, sorrowful, drowsy, sleepy, or very sick. This can cloud your judgment and make you say silly things. Talk to your husband or your wife instead. That's kind of a lot of these points here that I'm looking at. I'm kind of thinking the best way to avoid this kind of stuff is if you have a deep relationship with your own spouse. I don't really want to be talking to somebody about being depressed or sad or, this, that, or the other. Why would I want to be talking to somebody else when I'm super tired? Why would I be talking to somebody of the opposite sex when I'm depressed or super sad or going through something hard? I probably shouldn't be talking to somebody of the opposite sex about that and all of a sudden opening my heart about my life. It seems like that your spouse should be that person in your life. And that if they're not, then that's a red flag for you. Not that your marriage is terrible, just that maybe you need to work on some areas and make some extra effort to actually step in and go further and deeper in your marriage. Number 7, avoid unnecessary compliments of the opposite sex. Avoid unnecessary compliments of the opposite sex. Makes sense to me. It's kind of interesting because you'd be like, well, what if I like that person's hair or their dress, or I like that person's, whatever. I don't know. It could come across as wrong. Just be wise about it. Avoid unnecessary compliments of the opposite sex. Makes sense to me. Or, hey, you did a great job with this. Or I think that probably makes more sense versus the looks of somebody, just because of what it could imply. But again, I know there's going to be pushback on this because it'd be like, hey, this is too intense. That's too this. But I think the spirit of it, unnecessary compliments of the opposite sex, probably just avoid it. Right? If what you're saying, if it would make your spouse uncomfortable for you to be saying that to another person of the opposite sex, then just don't say it. Let's go to number 7. Let's see. Stop saying I love you to the opposite sex. This guy says, for what? For what? I think that's kind of a funny way to say it. Stop saying I love you to the opposite sex. For what? Why would you say it? I totally agree. Why would I be saying I love you to the opposite sex when, there's all kinds of definitions of love in the English language, but we know that is a phrase when you're married that's really protected simply for your spouse. Okay. And then of course you say that to family members, etc. But I think that's a pretty basic one. All right. Number 9, work on your marriage. Keep the fire of love and romance alive in your marriage. Yeah, I think that's a good idea too. Work on your marriage. So date nights, if you're not spending close alone time together, intimate time together consistently, then you're probably going to be lacking in your marriage, and you're probably going to be more open and vulnerable to an emotional connection with somebody that's not your spouse. So I think number 9, the proactive on your own marriage, probably can protect you from most of the other 8 that we just read. Let's see. Number 10, protect your family. Don't share your marital problems with your opposite sex friend. It will bond you. Totally agree. This one is one that I think is probably really easy to do for people. Like if you're going through a hard time in your marriage and then you are hanging out with friends or you're at work and then somebody asks you how life's going and they're like the opposite sex, and you just start opening up, or we kind of had a run in last night, and you just kind of stay surface with it, but you're sharing that you're struggling in your marriage. That's a danger. That is totally a danger. It's totally off limits, and it's actually none of that person's business. So I think that one is really, really good, because a lot of these things, guys, I think it's the spirit of the law. Obviously, these are not laws at all. This is just somebody's advice. But like I said, I read in the comments section on this, and I was seeing people just talking about how they lost their marriage to these very types of things. I'm like, that's crazy. But yeah, all right, let's keep going. Let's see. Number 11, never flirt with the opposite sex. I think the definition of flirting would be helpful here. And I'm not going to look up Webster's definition of flirting or anything like that, but I'm just going to say I think we all know it when we do it. And so the biggest thing for me when I think of 11 years ago, before I met Christina, 11 years ago, I would go out and about. I was always I was 29 years old. I was 30 years old, right? I hadn't met Christina yet, and I was ready to get married. I was ready to meet a wife. So pretty much everywhere I went, I wasn't flirting. I really wasn't that type of person. Honestly, that wasn't really my style, but I was definitely open to meeting somebody all the time. I was always thinking that way. I was open to meeting somebody, and if I met somebody that I thought I would like, then I would get their number, or I would be like, hey, how you doing? Or hey, nice dress, or whatever. You know what I mean? I'm just saying I was open and to making eye contact and connecting at a deeper level and seeing if I could possibly, connect in a way that could create an opportunity. Once I met Christina, that habit immediately had to change, right? And this is what I see sometimes is when you're not working on your own marriage, okay, you're not connecting deeply with your own marriage, then you don't change those habits and patterns that you acted like when you were single, okay? And for some of you who've been married for 2 decades, 3 decades or more, you're like, yeah, of course. But especially those in their first, 5 to 10 years of marriage, you got to change your patterns and your habits. When Christina and I got married, this might sound extreme, but we both just kind of looked at each other and were like, you know what, who's that friend? And why do they treat you that way? And we had to really ask those questions and be like, yeah, that's not a friend that I want to have in my life anymore. And neither one of us, so when we talked about our current friends that were opposite sex at the time, which we didn't have a ton or anything, but it was is that friend somebody that has expressed feelings to me in the past, or I've expressed feelings about in the past? Or is that a friend that the emotional connection is really strong and it could eventually develop to that? Is that a friend that we've spent a lot of alone time together, etc.? And is that a friend that I think is going to be helpful for the development of our marriage? And we just had to go, you know what? And some of this just happens naturally. You don't necessarily, I never had to cut off any female friendships whenever I got married to Christina. Hey, I'm cutting you off. That just happens naturally if you do it the right way. But anything that I felt was, that it was a threat to the emotional connection with my wife, I just let it slowly just dissipate. Right? And she did the same thing. There would be a friend that was a guy or something that was maybe even a nice person, and et cetera, et cetera. But it was yeah, that's a little bit too close of a friendship. Boom, create some distance and then build a life with your spouse, right? And some of those friends will stick around because they're safe and it'll be clear that they are, but the level of connection that they had with your spouse or with you prior to that marriage should never be the same. It should never be the same, because when you're single and making a great friend with the opposite sex, that friendship should not stay at that same level when now you're married as one with the opposite sex. Now, obviously, some of those friends can then become friends with both of you, but see, if that friendship can't mesh with your spouse, if that, let's say you're a woman and you're friends with a guy for maybe 5 years and y'all are best friends, and then now you meet your spouse and you get married, and this friend doesn't like this spouse, or this spouse has some, feelings about this friend, who are you going to choose, right? That's not going to be healthy for your marriage. And I've seen this happen where people just kind of go, well, that's my friend, I don't want to be mean to him. But it's like, at the end of the day, your spouse is who you're going to have kids with and build a life and a family with and a future with. And so you've got to go with those gut checks and then listen to the gut checks of your spouse as well. All right, let's see. I was going on number 11, never flirt with the opposite sex. And I got into this deal about friends, but similarly, the patterns of being flirtatious or like, when you're flirtatious and when you're not. And so I think just never flirt, never say something in a way that's going to garner the attention of the opposite sex for that purpose. Does that make sense? All right. Let's see. Number 12, mind the pictures you post on social media. Limit pictures that show your curves or portray you as sexy. So this guy's obviously talking to a woman right there, but I'd say the same thing for dudes. Like, dudes, we know what we're doing, right? Whenever we post the picture that's that, hey, look, I'm looking really buff. I'm going to wear this, that, or the other. I don't know. I just think check your motives. Check your motives when you're posting certain things. Like, am I trying to get the attention of the opposite sex? And how is that helpful at all to my life if I'm trying to get the attention of the opposite sex? Now, clearly, this person's saying limit pictures. They're not saying never post a picture of your success and health journey or this, that, or the other. But yeah, I'd say it's probably smart to not have your whole entire feed pictures of you wearing clothes that are just totally revealing, and that would make it look like you are available or something like that. And dudes, probably the same thing, where you're just literally trying to show off your workout and how jacked you are or something like that. I just say that's probably a good rule of thumb. Limit those type of things that you're posting that make it seem like that. And probably this is, again, not a rule, but it is something that I pay attention to. When I look at ministers out there that they share all kinds of stuff with them. They got pictures of them preaching. They got pictures of them traveling. They got pictures of them doing this and that. And I never see a picture of them and their wife hanging out. I just make note of it. I just make note of it. It's same thing with a woman. If they're always posting pictures about themselves doing this, that, or the other, but they never post a picture with their spouse, you just make note of it. You're like, well, that is, but especially for me, for dudes, like ministers or people that I follow, I'm like, if that person's not ever talking about their wife or showing a picture of their wife, what are they trying to give off? What's the impression that they're trying to give off to single women out there? So anyway, I just think it's interesting when you look at somebody's feed. Looking at somebody's feed says a lot about what they care about and what they're interested in. Okay, obviously people that run a business and everything's about their business, it makes sense because they're marketing. But when you see somebody's feed on social media, you can get an idea of who that person is and what they're mostly about. Hey guys, real quick, just want to let you know that this podcast is brought to you by Wake Up and Win Insurance, helping clients with their term life, whole life, index universal life, as well as retirement options such as overfunding index universal life and utilizing annuities for families. We've been doing this now for about 8 years, helping clients all over the United States utilize over 20 different A-rated life insurance companies. If you'd like to have a consultation, then just click the link below and book an appointment, and we'll see if we can help you out. Take care and keep enjoying the podcast. Do not contact your ex after marriage. That would seem clear, right? That would seem pretty clear. And I would encourage you, take down pictures of you with your ex after marriage, things like that. I mean, there's things like that in the social media age that are so strange that exist now that never existed before. But I'd say when you meet that person that you're going to be with the rest of your life, and I'd say if you break up with a person, go back and just clean up your social media on it. I'd say just clean it up a bit because, frankly, it's just odd to have all that stuff lingering around. And it's helpful to not have to go do it after you get married. Be like, oh, shoot, I need to take that down. Or, hey, you should take that down or whatever. So that's just something you should do. I think in the early days of our engagement, we just kind of went, let's just clean anything that could be out there. Let's just double check. And I think we had mostly done that anyway, but it's just a smart thing to do. And don't allow, I'd say too, and this is a big one, I'd say go ahead and just remove from friends or block all your exes on your phone, on your social media. People go, that's too extreme. My ex and I are in good standing. We have a healthy friendship. It's like, okay, you think that's a good idea to have a healthy friendship with your ex when you get married? Probably not. I'd call that an unhealthy marriage boundary, not a healthy friendship with your ex. So I think that's a great one, number 13. Don't chat with the opposite sex on days. All right, number 14. That one's fun. Yeah. Okay, let's go on. I agree with that. Sure. I would just say, get with your spouse. Get with your spouse. Get with your spouse every day. All right, number 15, stop focusing on your spouse's weaknesses and appreciate their strengths. If you always see the bad side of your spouse, you will be angry, bitter, critical, and look for someone who can understand you and make you happy outside from your spouse. That is the beginning of an emotional affair and eventually a sexual affair. It is the beginning of the end of a once glorious marriage. That's really good. Stop focusing. This is my favorite one, actually. Stop focusing on your spouse's weakness. Now, obviously, I don't have a problem with that because my wife has no weaknesses. She's going to love that. But anyway, yeah, so stop focusing on your spouse's weakness. Like, we all have weaknesses. When I look at my life, Christina looks at me, my weaknesses are glaring to me, right? I know my weaknesses. They're so huge to me. But Christina's not sitting around pointing them out all the time. And I know that she's not. She's not pointing them out to me, and she's not like always thinking of them and thinking of me through the lens of my weaknesses. And I really, really appreciate that. As those of you who have been married for, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, so on and so forth, and even further, you're going to realize that people change over time if they're humble and they're willing to. Some things will never change sometimes, right? But if you're humble and you're willing to grow, marriage can be the best crucible of change. It could be the best place. I was single into my early 30s, and Christina and I were talking about this the other night. I said, I had certain patterns that I was like selfish, and I didn't even realize it. Here I am, like a minister of the gospel, traveling and preaching, and I was selfish in my life and didn't realize it. And so I had patterns that weren't even bad necessarily. It was just like, when you move out at 18 and you live with roommates, but then you end up living alone for most of your 20s, you take care of yourself. You have patterns that are like, I make food for myself. I run the house this way. I do my life this way. This is what I do. I go here when I want to. I do this when I want to. And you live your life. And so the longer you're single into your adulthood, the deeper the patterns go. And they're not necessarily all bad patterns. It's just self-centered patterns that are about your life. But when you get married, your life is not your own anymore. Especially for dudes, your life is not your own. Jesus said Paul said in Ephesians chapter 5 that the husband must love the wife like Christ loves the church and lay down his life for her. That is the most intense thing ever. The mystery of marriage is the mystery of Christ and the church. That's why in marriage, I feel like there should be no room for any kind of this stuff. And I think that the idea of emotional affairs should be a topic that should be talked about from pastors. I think it would be helpful because a lot of times, growing up in the I kiss dating goodbye culture, I think there's a lot of rules that are dropped on kids and on college single groups that are taught for the future that are just rules, but there's no understanding behind those rules. There's no why behind the what. And so it's like, you tell your kids like, yeah, don't have sex before marriage. It's like, okay, but did you even explain what it was? Did you even explain how it gets to that place? Did you even explain the way the emotions connect with a person to make you want to go there? Did you even explain to your sons about how that process can begin happening in their mind because of how crazy the world is and just the basics of human nature, right? I think it's the same thing in marriage. Like we talk about, hey, don't have an affair. Don't go cheat on your spouse. Don't do this. Don't do that. It's like, how about talk about how it gets there and what to do to avoid that, and how to make your marriage stronger and more fortified so that you don't even open up your emotions in the way that only you and your spouse should be connected, that you don't open up that can of emotions. It's really easy to say, well, that person had an affair. Like, it's really easy and clear. Those lines are pretty clear, okay, when it comes to an affair. But when it comes to an emotional connection or an emotional affair, that's not really talked about much, and especially in the age of social media, where on your phone you have access to people have access to you to have a private conversation with you suddenly, without, like, I remember even just like last year, I saw a person that I knew years ago that their marriage like went on the rocks big time because there was all of these DM conversations that came up in their Instagram, and like they were caught, and I went, oh my gosh, like this is real, and it's out there where people are like DMing people, trying to pull them into conversations, and you have to have boundaries. You have to have guardrails that are going to protect your marriage, because if you don't, then all of a sudden you're suddenly in an emotional connection with somebody, what would be called an emotional affair, and then it can really chip away at your marriage. It can chip away at your family, and it can ruin what God had in store for you just for this stupid feeling that you get of an emotional connection with somebody. And it's super sad. So if there's an emotional loss in your heart, emotional need, and you need that, then that's something you got to work on with your spouse. Do the hard work. Don't go get the easy connection, but do the hard work that will last a lifetime versus going to get the easy connection, right? So anyway, that is the post. I think that's the last point of the post there. Let me see. This guy says, flee from all appearance of evil is what the Bible says. He says, what you will not eat, don't bring close to your nose. Don't even smell it. Don't start what you cannot finish. Avoid all emotional affairs. They will destroy your marriage. I thought that was good. I think that's a really, really, really good post. Yeah, I like it. So let me know your thoughts below on that post. I hope that's helpful for you. And yeah, give your comments of anything that you've learned over the years or any book recommendations on this type of idea. But I thought this was great. I thought it was definitely worth sharing with you guys. All right, guys, stay tuned for more with Wake Up and Win. We'll be in touch. Take care.